Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Thursday, December 28th slate of college football bowl games for DFS action on DraftKings and FanDuel. We are going to be breaking down the three-game slate on DraftKings. FanDuel did it a little bit differently. FanDuel is going with a full four-game slate. DraftKings, they decided to not include the 11 a.m. kickoff game, the Wasabi Fenway Bowl between SMU and Boston College. I don't know why that game is kicking off at 11 a.m., but I'm not mad at that game not being on the DraftKings slate because you have two offenses that I find very difficult to predict and project. You've got SMU, who I have dubbed as the socialist offense because they play 5 different running backs and 7 different wide receivers, and you never know who's going to score the touchdowns. And then you have Boston College on the other side, where it's just Thomas Castellanos running around doing crazy things with the football, and I play him a lot, and I've lost money playing him this year. So I'm not mad about that game not being included on the DraftKings slate. So we're only going to break down the 3 games that are on the DraftKings slate. That was my full breakdown of the SMU Boston College game. If you're playing FanDuel, SMU plays 12 different guys. Boston College is just one quarterback running around doing crazy things. That's all you need to know. All right, so we are going to break down this full 3-game slate. That we're going to break down the Pinstripe Bowl, the PopTarts Bowl, as well as the Valera Alamo Bowl here on this episode, and kind of give you guys a rundown of what these teams are going to look like for their lineups and what you can expect to see in these bowl games and how to target them from a DFS perspective. Now, as always, I kind of do have to preface this with bowl season. There's a lot of transfer portaling going on. There's a lot of opting out going on, declaring for the draft going on. So some of this that I'm going to have here with some of these guys that are in the portal, there's going to be a little bit of speculation. I'm going to try to be very clear on what we know is certain and what we think is speculation among these teams, because you never really do know with bowl season. And if you're really uncertain about a guy, you go on Twitter, search their name 30 minutes before kickoff, and somebody's going to let you know whether they're warming up, not warming up, in street clothes, whatever. So that is just my little disclaimer before we get started with all of bowl season. So speaking of bowl season, we're going to be here for the rest of bowl season. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the audio feed as well. That way you can be notified when new episodes drop, because we are going to be here with you doing each day for the rest of bowl season right up until the college football playoff on January 1st, and we'll even talk about the showdown slate on Monday, January 8th. That should be a lot of fun. So if you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the audio feed, you will get those episodes, as well as our regularly scheduled college basketball and NFL content. And we had a big announcement today when it comes to fantasy golf. We are running a one-and-done league for the 2024 PGA Tour season. Check out the audio feed, check out the YouTube channel, or check out my Twitter feed at Mike's Money Picks if you want information on that, if you're interested in playing some fantasy golf. All right, so that does it for the introduction. Let's go ahead and dive into game 1 of this 3-game slate with the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. All right, so game 1 of the day is actually the game with the lowest total between Rutgers and Miami. It is the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl being played in Yankee Stadium, which is kind of a cool venue for a bowl game, in my opinion. But this one does have the lowest total of the day. The spread right now is Rutgers minus 2.5 with a total of 41.5, meaning the implied score is about 22-20 in favor of Rutgers. I always round off when it comes to the implied totals just because a team can't actually go out and score 0.5 points on the field. So not the prettiest game environment. And we've seen this a lot with these 3 and 4 game bowl game slates, where if you're looking at the early game and you don't really, you're not really sold on a guy, you can just fade it all together, make it a 2-game slate, and hope that those 2 games end up going off. I think that's going to be a strategy that a lot of people employ on this one, because this one is just a pretty darn ugly game environment. However, I do think there could be some diamonds in the rough. First of which could be Rutgers quarterback Gavin Wimsatt. He is the starter, and he is going to play in this game. There's no opt-out. There's no portaling or going on. So it is going to be Gavin Wimsatt. And he's actually been a decent points per dollar play this season. He's only $6,200 on DraftKings here on this slate. And he has 4 games over 20 fantasy points on the season, 2 games over 26 fantasy points on the season, and he averages double-digit rushing attempts on the season. So you're getting a dual-threat quarterback who does have a legitimate little bit of upside at a pretty low salary. And I kind of like it. Like, the more I think about it, I'm coming around to playing Gavin Wimsatt in some of my lineups here on this Thursday slate. When you look at what he struggled at this season, he really struggled against the best defenses in the Big Ten. Penn State, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan State he didn't do well against. Wisconsin he didn't do well against. Michigan he really didn't do well against. So, those are good defenses. So I'm willing to kind of give the guy a pass when he's played up against mediocre defenses, he's been pretty good. So Gavin Wimsatt might be a sneaky good points per dollar play in this first game. Ja'Cory Brown is going to start for Miami. And look, I got to be honest, I know next to nothing about this guy other than the fact that he's been behind Tyler Van Dyke and Emory Williams all season long. And those two guys were nothing special. Tyler Van Dyke only averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game. And that really ain't going to cut it at $6,400 if I'm being honest. And this guy didn't play ahead of Tyler Van Dyke. So I definitely I'm probably not going to play a whole lot of Ja'Cory Brown. I think if I were getting real freaky and wanted to do a game stack of this game just to try to be different and try to be contrarian, I could see it because those two guys are pretty cheap and you could pay up at, other options. But I don't think I'm going to be playing a whole lot of Ja'Cory Brown here on this Thursday slate. Now, the running back position is very nasty for the Miami Hurricanes. They have one of the nastiest committees in all of college football. It was 4 deep, but now it's only 3 deep with Donald Chaney in the portal. But you've got Mark Fletcher Jr., Henry Parrish Jr., and A.J. Allen, the only one of which who isn't a junior, and they all get carries. In fact, Fletcher Jr., Parrish Jr., and A.J. Allen all saw 9 or more carries in their last game. If we could just make that one running back that was getting 27 carries, it'd be a really easy play. But with the fact that all 3 of them are going to play, all 3 of them are going to split time, it makes it very hard to play one of these guys. Fletcher has been the most consistent best, but Henry Parrish does have some spike weeks. I think if you're playing enough lineups, like if you're 20 maxing or you're 150 maxing, it would probably be wise to get some of these Miami running backs in there, but it's really hard to feel good about them as an optimal play if you're playing a small number of lineups. Now, on the Rutgers side, they probably have the guy who is going to be the most popular from this game, and that is Kyle Monangai. He has been the workhorse back pretty much since the start of the season, and he's been pretty solid. He averages 15 fantasy points a game at a salary of only $5,400. We will take that. And he also has shown a pretty high ceiling. He's had 5 games over 18 fantasy points. So Kyle Monangai is probably the guy from this game that's going to get the most traction, the most ownership. And I kind of get it. Miami is not a bad run defense, though. They only give up 3.4 yards per carry on the season. But if Monangai is going to get 20 plus carries, in a 3-game slate, playing a running back who's going to get a pretty big workload is not a poor strategy. So I will definitely probably be playing a little bit of Kyle Monangai on this slate. Now, at the wide receiver position, Miami has one starting receiver in the portal, and that is Colby Young. So it leaves their other 2 starters, Xavier Restrepo as well as Jacoby George. And the other starter is expected to be Isaiah Horton. He's also listed as an OR with Tyler Harrell on the depth chart. Tyler Harrell is the stone minimum $3,000 on DraftKings, and he's listed as the OR. So he might be worth a look just for some salary relief. But I really like Restrepo. Restrepo has kind of been all season long like the analytics nerd's dream for fantasy football because he gets a ton of targets. In fact, he leads the entire slate in target share on the season. He just hasn't really reeled all of them in, and he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. So you're looking at a guy who is going to get the ball thrown his way quite a lot and hasn't found the end zone. Could he be due for some touchdown regression and have a multiple touchdown game in the bowl? It's absolutely a possibility. Restrepo is one of the safest wide receiver plays on the slate, and I really don't care who's throwing him the football. He was successful with Tyler Van Dyke. He was successful with Emory Williams. And if you're a 3rd-string quarterback playing in a bowl game, what's going to make your life easier? Throw into your stud and future NFL receiver, Xavier Restrepo. So I really do like Restrepo here in this spot. Now, on the Rutgers side, they've been pretty unproductive all season long at receiver, but it is the same 3 guys. It's Dremel, it's Washington, and it's Jackson. Dremel has been the best on paper all season long. He hasn't really shown a legitimate ceiling unless he scores a touchdown. He hasn't, received for more than 80 yards in a game. Washington is the same way, just no real big performances. Jaquay Jackson is the cheapest, which might make him the most appealing. But honestly, Gavin Wimsatt's a dual threat quarterback, and so even if I'm playing Gavin Wimsatt, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to play a wide receiver with him. I think you can play Gavin Wimsatt unstacked because of how unproductive these guys have been. All right, now let's go ahead and switch on over to Game 2. Game 2 is the PopTarts Bowl, which is a pretty cool mascot in my opinion. We've got NC State taking on Kansas State, and I think this is a really intriguing matchup. Right now, Vegas has it as Kansas State minus 2.5 with a total of 47.5, which means that the implied total is about 25 to 22 in favor of the Wildcats. I'll be honest, I kind of think NC State's going to win this game. NC State's been playing some really good football, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And to me, this game has the widest range of outcomes out of any game on this slate. I could see this game being a 13-10 slugfest. I could see this game being a 45-42 shootout. I don't really know what to expect from this game. And it's a game that if you're playing enough lineups, which I am, I'm going to have some game stacks of this game just because I think there's a chance that this game ends up going absolutely bonkers. So, why might this game go absolutely bonkers? Well, you have two dual threat quarterbacks, and by dual threat, they're really more of a threat running than throwing. Avery Johnson is the starter for Kansas State now that Will Howard has left through the portal, and Avery Johnson split time like in the middle of the season with Will Howard, and it made it like a terrible situation at target, but they really just brought him in just to run the ball, and he ran for 5 touchdowns against Texas Tech and had a 42 fantasy point performance. So that shows you the kind of ceiling that he has because of what he can do as a runner. However, NC State's defense is not exactly an easy matchup for a mobile quarterback. They gave up only 25 fantasy points to Kyron Drones of Virginia Tech, who is also a mobile quarterback, and I think Kyron Drones is probably right now at this point in their career a better player than Avery Johnson. And Drake May had about the same, and Drake May's not exactly a mobile quarterback, but Drake May's going to play on Sundays. So this NC State defense hasn't really yielded huge performances to the quarterback position. So I really think Johnson, the upside is there, but it's also going to be a pretty low floor as well if he doesn't get there. Now, on the NC State side, they have gone back to Brennan Armstrong as their starter. He started the season and was kind of a disappointment, and there were a lot of people questioning Dave Doeren and this NC State team after that loss to Louisville. But he's come back after MJ Morris entered the transfer portal, and Brandon Armstrong's been pretty good. Last 3 games of the season against Wake, Virginia Tech, and UNC, they won all 3 of them. They scored 26 or more points in all 3 of them, and Brandon Armstrong had 24 or more fantasy points in all 3 of them. He is a true dual threat. He's averaged 15 carries per game in these 3 games that he started here at the tail end of the season. So Brandon Armstrong, a lot of upside as well with those fantasy point totals. And this is his last game. He's been in college football for like 7 years now, and you got to feel like a guy like Brandon Armstrong wants to go out on a bang and wants to leave with a good performance. I could see Brandon Armstrong having a really big game here against Kansas State. Now, at the running back position, this one also presents a super massive range of outcomes. And for Kansas State, DJ Giddens is going to be the starter. They've been pretty much a 50-50 committee with Trayshawn Ward and DJ Giddens the entire season. And the one game where Trayshawn Ward missed was the UCF game, where DJ Giddens had 30 carries, 207 yards, and 4 touchdowns, as well as 8 catches out of the backfield. 64 fantasy points in that game. That shows you the immense ceiling that he has if he is going to be getting all the touches. However, it also goes with a floor, because against Texas Tech, the Avery Johnson game that we mentioned, where Avery Johnson ran for 5 touchdowns, DJ Giddens only had 6.8 fantasy points because he didn't get in on any of those touchdowns. So the question becomes with Giddens is, does he end up taking the full workload and going off with it like he did against UCF, or does Avery Johnson vulture all the touchdowns and Giddens ends up with scraps? I think both of those are a possibility. Is it also a possibility that this NC State defense absolutely shuts out Kansas State? Yes, that is also a possibility. This NC State defense is very good. So I think that DJ Giddens has a super wide range of outcomes, but I definitely think he's a guy that you got to work in one lineup or two because of the immense ceiling that he has with, getting the full lion's share of the workload. Now, for NC State, they have a big old or on the depth chart listed for Kendrick Raphael and Delbert Mims. To me, Mims has looked like the better player over the last month of the season when I have watched NC State. He hasn't really been super duper productive, hasn't scored more than 11 fantasy points in a game, but he's looked more effective than Kendrick Raphael, who's not had more than 8 fantasy points in a game over those last 3 games. I think the arrival of Brennan Armstrong, or the return of Brennan Armstrong at the quarterback position, also kind of hurt these running backs upside a little bit, because Brennan Armstrong can score rushing touchdowns with his legs as well. But Kansas State's a bad rushing defense. They surrender 4.9 yards per carry on the season, which ranks 108th. So I will probably make sure to find a spot for Delbert Mims in one lineup just because of the upside. Like I said, this game has a super wide range of outcomes. There's a lot of guys who have an immense ceiling playing in this game. And so if you're playing multiple lineups, you got to really look for a way to get all these guys with that high ceiling into a lineup at some point, in my opinion. Now, at the wide receiver position is where things start getting murky. So let's talk about Kansas State first. So Kansas State is going to be playing a bunch of unproven wide receivers. A lot of their starting wide receiving core, as well as their starting tight end, are in the portal or not playing in this game. Maybe I believe Phillip Brooks declared for the draft. And so on the depth chart listed as the starters are Keegan Johnson, Jace Brown, and Jaden Jackson. Keegan Johnson has just kind of been a package player over the course of the season. He had a really big game against Texas with 7 for 70 and a touchdown and kind of didn't really do much after that. Jace Brown has actually been productive over the last half of the season, 3 out of his last 4 games in double-digit fantasy points. And then Jaden Jackson is the really unproven one. Really had a good start to the season in blowout games, but hasn't really done much in conference play. So those 3 are going to be the starters. Look, if you're playing Avery Johnson's primarily a mobile quarterback anyway. I think you can get away with not stacking him with one of these wide receivers, but at their price tags, they're really appealing. And if this game ends up shooting out, you got to feel like one of those wide receivers is going to end up scoring. Now, this Kansas State offense also loves to feature the tight end position. They had Ben Sinnott, who was really good all season long. Well, the listed starter for the bowl game is going to be Will Swanson. He's only $4,000 on DraftKings. And again, you're looking at a very low cost for, a guy that could end up having a big time ceiling. So that's kind of my thoughts about this entire Kansas State offense is I'm going to take shots with them in my lineups without being super overexposed to any of them because all of them carry a lot of risk. Now, on the NC State side, there is one guy that doesn't carry a whole lot of risk at all, and that is Kevin, a.k.a. KC Concepcion. He has been dynamite as a true freshman for NC State this season, and he's been particularly good since Brandon Armstrong became the starter again. In the 3 games that Brandon Armstrong started at the end of the season, 13, 34, and 40 fantasy points for KC Concepcion. I think he is the best wide receiver play on the slate, and I think he's going to be pretty popular, but for very good reason. Now, the rest of NC State's receiving core is kind of a mess. Lazan, Collins, and Gray are listed as the other 3 starters. And Bradley Rosner, who's like 30, will be used in the Reds. Look it up seriously. I think he's like 30. He will be used in the red zone, and so you got to factor him in a little bit as well. But it's Lasan, Gray, and Collins that have been the starters, quote unquote. Collins had a pretty decent game against UNC, scored a touchdown. Lasan has been the guy who's been consistently the second option after Concepcion, though. He's just consistently been second in targets. So he would be the guy that I would consider if I was pivoting off of Concepcion. But why pivot off of Concepcion when he's been that good over these last month of the season? All right, that does it for the first 2 bowl games. So let's go ahead and take ourselves a quick breather, and then let's talk about the last bowl game of the night. All right, so before we get started with what might be the most interesting game of the night, I do want to mention there are some places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter, aka X, at Mike's Money Picks. I do my best to tweet out any updates if there's ever any injuries that kind of update my thoughts on players. If there's ever anything pertaining to the show in terms of updates, I do try to get those out there as well. And I'm more than happy to answer any start-sit questions if you have any also. So at Mike's Money Picks on Twitter if you want to reach out to me there. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Basically, we've got a lot of people in there, a lot of smart people in there who play a lot of DFS for a lot of different sports, college football, college basketball, NFL, NBA, it's all in there. And we just have a lot of fun, bouncing ideas off each other, talking plays, talking strategy, and then sweating it out together. And part of the fun of DFS is having people to talk about it with. So if you're looking for more people to talk DFS with, head on over to the Fantasy Corner Discord. I also do write a full article for every college football, college basketball, and NFL slate onto my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks, where you can find my core plays for the day, as well as kind of my general lineup and attack strategy for the slate. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee that you're going to read it and instantly win GPPs. That's not how it works. But I can sit here and guarantee that I give out, a lot of information that a lot of people don't have when it comes to, the college sports, college football, and college basketball. And so it can give you a lot of ideas to help you get better at building lineups and give you more information to kind of use for your toolbox for DraftKings and FanDuel for those 2 sports. Lastly, if you are looking to be or to try something new this season, maybe you want to join a sports book, you want to join a new DFS site, Underdog, Prize Picks, whatever, head on over to signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. What Sign Up Expert does is they give you the best offers and promo codes for every DFS player prop and sportsbook site, and we're partnered with them. So you can use our links. It shows me some support as well, and you get all those offers and promo codes for new users. You'll get the best one available at Sign Up Expert. I know there's a lot of states that are changing some laws on January 1, so if you're looking to try something new, signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks. All right. So now let's go ahead and talk about the Valero Alamo Bowl. So also perfect sponsor for the Alamo Bowl, in my opinion, because there is a lot of Valeros like in Texas and San Antonio, and so it's just perfect sponsor. Anyway, the Valero Alamo Bowl is going to be Arizona versus Oklahoma. The spread is currently Arizona -2.5 with a total of 59.5, which is by far the highest total of the day. So the implied total for both teams is Arizona 31-28, which makes these two teams the actual highest implied scoring teams of the slate. It is not every day where you have even a 3 or 4 game slate where the two highest total teams are playing against each other. That's how good of a game environment this one is. And if I had to guess, I would say that the two quarterbacks from this game are going to end up being the most two popular quarterbacks individually on this slate. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be popular played together because that's not something people generally do a whole lot unless they're just stacking up a game. But I think that that is a viable strategy, and I think that both of these quarterbacks make for really solid plays. And I think that with the total being 59.5, I think it would be foolish to ignore this game, especially considering there's a lot of guys in this game where we kind of know where the production is going to come from. So I think this is the preeminent game to stack on the slate. As I mentioned in, talking about the PopTarts Bowl with NC State and Kansas State, I think that one has a high ceiling and a chance of shooting out. This one is very likely to shoot out, in my opinion. So the two quarterbacks themselves, we've got Noah Fifita, who took over the job after a few weeks for Jaden DeLora, and he's been pretty solid. He's had a really solid floor all season long. He hasn't started a game and finished with under 15 fantasy points, which is really, if you're playing cash games, that's pretty darn sound to have a guy that has a floor that big. He hadn't really shown that much of a ceiling this season until the last game of the season where he put up 43 fantasy points against Arizona State. The downside with Fifita is that he is not a runner at all. He has close to 0 rushing yards on the season, which is pretty bad. So all of the upside with Fifita is baked into he has to throw the ball and he has to throw for touchdowns. If he is not getting you the 300-yard bonus and if he is not getting you multiple touchdowns, it's not going to be a great fantasy performance for him. So for that reason, I think he has a very narrow pathway to a ceiling game, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a chance for it nonetheless. Now, Jackson Arnold is a little bit of an unknown. He is the future for this Oklahoma offense, and he was a very highly recruited freshman coming in. All the Oklahoma fans are really excited about him, and he is a dual threat. He will run the football. So I think Jackson Arnold has a incredibly high ceiling. This Oklahoma offense is going to run at a fast tempo. That they are going to put up some points on the board, and with him being a dual threat, he's going to have the ball in his hands. So I think he probably has the most pure ceiling of any quarterback on the slate, just because we don't really know what he is. Like, if you were to sit here and argue, well, Avery Johnson has the highest ceiling, Mike, because he already has a 45 fantasy point performance. Well, we know what Avery Johnson is. Avery Johnson's a primary running quarterback. We don't know what Jackson Arnold is. Jackson Arnold could end up being the next Caleb Williams for all we know. So I really think Jackson Arnold, highest ceiling of anybody on the slate. I will be playing him a lot in my DFS lineups. At the running back position, Oklahoma has probably the clearest running back situation on the entire slate right now, and it is with the youngster Gavin Sawchuk. So I think he has the highest floor of any running back on the slate. He hasn't been the starter the whole season. There's been a really big-time committee at Oklahoma. You had a lot of guys seeing carries, but over the last 4 weeks, it's really kind of centralized into being primarily Sawchuk. And over those last 4 games, he's carried the ball at least 13 times in all 4 of them. He's led the team in carries in all 4 of those games, and he has scored at least 16 fantasy points in all 4 of those games. Now, Tawee Walker, who did start the season, like at the middle portion of the season, is in the portal, but he's apparently still practicing with the team. He's only $3,000. I think there's a chance he might play, but I'm not going to sit here and argue that you should play him. But I'm just letting you know that he is still practicing with the team, even though he's in the portal. And so he might be worth a look at only $3,000. And then you do have Javonte Barnes will likely see some carries as well. Oklahoma, they ran a committee all season long. It wouldn't shock me to see them bust out a committee here in this game. But Sawchuk looks like he's going to be the guy for the bowl game. Now, on the Arizona side, you have Jonah Coleman, who got hurt in their Week 13 game against Arizona State. He is expected to be available for the bowl matchup. He's listed on the depth chart for the bowl matchup. But I don't know, man. If you're hurt, why would you play in a bowl game? Like, I don't understand the upside there. So I think he would be splitting carries with Michael Wiley anyway. And so I think that it makes Michael Wiley a more attractive play to know that Jonah Coleman is banged up and might not see a full workload, because in the last two games, Michael Wiley scored 26 and 30 fantasy points. What I like about Wiley is that even if Jonah Coleman does play, and even if Jonah Coleman does outcarry Michael Wiley, Wiley gets usage in the passing game and Wiley gets usage in the red zone. And those are like the cheat codes for the running back position. So if I were playing one of the two running backs for Arizona, it's probably going to be Michael Wiley. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the wide receiver position, because this is just like, after the week of bowl games we've had, this is just like chef's kiss, like perfection, because we have the two most straightforward wide receiver rooms of all of bowl season, college football playoff games notwithstanding. We've got to combine 0 opt-outs or portals among the regular starters for both of these two teams' receiving corps. And that's what we want to see. We know what we're going to get out of these receiving rooms. So for Arizona, the 3 starters are Teteroa McMillan, Jacob Cowing, and Montana Lamonius Craig, with Tanner McLaughlin at tight end. Let's go ahead and break it down. Lamonius Craig is a guy that, he's out there on the field. He's had some double-digit fantasy point performances, but nothing really huge. When it comes to McMillan and Cowing, entering the season, everybody thought Cowing was going to be better. And when Jaden DeLora was the starter, Cowing was the more productive wide receiver. But it has really shifted to Teteroa McMillan over the second half of the season. If I'm not mistaken, McMillan and Noah Fafita played high school football together, so there's that chemistry there. And in the last 5 games, McMillan has not scored under 18 fantasy points. 2 of those have been over 33 fantasy points. So you're getting a major ceiling with Teteroa McMillan, and I think he is right up there with KC Concepcion in terms of the top wide receiver plays on the slate. I think he can be played stacked or unstacked with Fafita, because he has shown the ability to get there and get value without Fafita getting there as well. So McMillan is one of the top plays on the slate, in my opinion. Cowing would be your ownership pivot. If you are somebody who is playing in GPPs and you are trying to produce lineups that are going to get you to the top and be different from others, playing Cowing over McMillan would achieve that. And that's the main way I see Cowing. I think McMillan is objectively the better play, but if you're looking to make a pivot, Cowing would be a guy you could pivot to. Now, on the Oklahoma side, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Their 3 starters are Stoops, Anderson, and Farouk. However, you will see Gavin Freeman play some snaps, and you will see Jaden Gibson play some snaps, as well as they have throughout the entire season. And then they have Austin Stogner at tight end, but the 3 primary receivers are Stoops, Anderson, and Farouk. Anderson is the one I'm least likely interested in. Look, he's very touchdown dependent. You look at his game log, and the games he scored a touchdown, he was pretty good. The games he didn't score a touchdown, not so good. So Anderson is a guy that I would probably be out on among the 3 of them. Farouk is an interesting one because he's a really elite post-catch wide receiver. He had a really big game against Texas because he was able to make those DBs miss after the catch and just break free into the secondary. And to me, he's a guy that could give you a ceiling performance. Like, all it would take is for him to take a slant, make one guy miss, and then boom, there's 80 yards and a touchdown right there. And he also gets carries out of the backfield also. So I think Farouk has a legitimately very high ceiling for this team. But I've been kind of bearing the lead here. The best receiver for Oklahoma this season has been Drake Stoops. In 3 out of the last 4 games, he's had double-digit catches. In all 3 of those games, he had over 33 fantasy points. He's been really good. Now, he has shown a much lower floor than the other top-tier receivers, McMillan and Concepcion, but the ceiling has been there. 3 out of the last 4 games, over 33 fantasy points. And the only thing that might be a slight cause for concern for Drake Stoops is the fact that he is playing with Jackson Arnold, and it is not Dylan Gabriel. And if Jackson Arnold just ends up running all over the field, then that's going to mean less volume for Drake Stoops. And he has been kind of dependent on that volume because he is not a super big play receiver. Farouk is really kind of the big play guy in this group. And, Stoops is kind of more dependent on volume. So I would prefer to play Stoops. I think Stoops is objectively the better play. But if you're looking to pivot off of Stoops, I think that Farouk makes a lot of sense. All right, so that does it for the Thursday, December 28th slate of bowl games. Hopefully, we're able to give you guys some information here that is going to help you build some winning lineups on DFS, on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you like what you saw in this video, hit the like button. It really does help me out a lot. Helps the videos get noticed. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. Again, really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. It does not go unheard. And hit the subscribe button as well. That way you can be notified when all of our new content drops, like our content for the rest of bowl season, as well as our regularly scheduled college basketball, NFL, and golf content. If you're looking to join the golf one and done, check out the Twitter feed at Mike's Money Picks, or the YouTube channel or the audio feed. There is a link to our episode where we talk all about golf one and done. It's a super fun format. You can follow it even if you're a casual fan of golf. And I really want to get more interest in a fantasy format that I think is very fun and enjoyable for everybody. Lastly, if you want more from me, remember you can join the Fantasy Corner Discord. Articles are on the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I will actually be having that up quite shortly because I'm actually going to play a round of golf in the morning, which is partly why I'm not mad that the Fenway Bowl is not included on this slate, because now I get a little bit more time to make those lineups for the 2 p.m. start. So that does it for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to you in all your DFS endeavors. Best of luck to you the rest of bowl season. Remember, we will be back here tomorrow night again talking about the December 29th bowls. So if you made it this far, hopefully I was able to help you guys out with your lineups. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you guys next time.